So I think we're good to get started. So, okay, I'll do a quick welcome. Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for joining this webinar today on the RSPCA rebranding journey. It's great to see so many of you join us today and on this really interesting topic. So I'm Joanna. I am a senior customer success manager here at Frontify. And I also work very close together with many clients that have gone through a big brand refresh or are going through it at the moment. So today we'll be speaking with RSPCA and JKR on how they rebranded RSPCA and their experience, their lessons, their challenges with it. So for anyone who doesn't know RSPCA, they're the Royal Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, and they are the leading animal welfare charity that was established a long time ago, back in 1824. And we also have JKR, so Jones Knowles Ritchie, which is an independent creative agency that helped RSPCA with their rebrand. So on that note, I would like to welcome our esteemed panelists. From RSPCA, we have Olivia Reid, who is the Assistant Director of Marketing and Communications. And from JKR, we have Lee Rolston, Chief Growth Officer. So I'm just going to hand it over to Olivia now, if you want to introduce yourself briefly, a little bit more about your role and your experience in branding.
Hi, thanks everyone. Thank you for inviting me today. It's a really great opportunity to reflect on where we've come from, and it's been a great journey, so it's really good to share that experience with you. I've spent most of my career working for not-for-profits, particularly around brand and bringing their brand to life to help them grow. My big experience has been at the RSPCA recently, but I did a lot of work at Prostate Cancer UK as well, and really transforming that into a brand that really helped men connect with the disease, but understand that there was, support and information for them to go to as well. And the brand really helped accelerate that charity's growth. So I've taken a lot of the experience of developing a new brand there into my role, helping transform the RSPCA and thinking particularly about how we build on the strategy of the RSPCA brand in order to then present our new self to the world. So it's been a great experience and looking forward to talking about this now. Oh, and I know that it's important for me to talk about what my favourite animal is as well. Yes. So, and I think for me at the moment, it's it's an underrated animal, but the humble chicken is a really wonderful animal. They're very, very social beings. But the reason I want to champion chickens today is because actually over 1 billion are slaughtered every year in the UK alone. They're very, very under the radar. And I think we all should ask ourselves when the last time you saw a chicken just roaming in a field. Unfortunately, it's now very much behind closed doors. So we want to kind of help people sort of rethink their relationship with animals. And I think chickens are a really good champion to help us do that.
Nice. No, I really like that. It is like an undervalued animal for sure. So yeah, thank you for sharing. Lee, over to you for a quick introduction.
Thank you. And hi, everyone. And again, likewise to Olivia, it's a pleasure to be speaking to you today. So yeah, I'm Lee Rolston, Chief Growth Officer at JKR. For those of you who don't know us as an agency, we are a global branding agency. We're 34 years old, and really the clients and the brands you may well associate with us and know us for are brands like Budweiser, M&M's, Heinz, Uber, Burger King, Dunkin' Donuts, big global iconic brands. Alongside that, we've also worked with non-for-profit and charities. So helped rebrand The Big Issue in the UK, which is a homeless charity that aims to support homeless people to get back on their feet, and the Diana Award, which is in the image of Princess Diana, aims to support young children through issues such as bullying and to empower them. And then recently the RSPCA, we were honoured to work on that rebrand. So that's who we are, and I'd love to share our journey on this amazing case study.
Mm-hmm. Amazing, thank you. And your favorite animal?
Oh, sorry, yeah. Oh, my 3 daughters would kill me. I didn't say it was my dog Disco, but I think I also like from the humble chicken to the noble swan. We live near the canal in London. These Swans go past our garden, so I have a fondness for them.
Yeah, definitely. Beautiful creatures as well. So yeah, thank you for sharing. Amazing. So just as a side note, my favorite animal is a cat. I have a cat as well, who's been meowing the whole time, by the way. So I think he knows something's happening. So before we kick off with the actual panel, we have a really nice video with you to share about RSPCA. So this will now pop up on your screen. Perfect. The perfect introduction to what we'll be talking about. So let's take a few steps back of how we got to this amazing video and rebranding. Let's go back to the beginning. So what led to the rebrand of RSPCA? Was there a specific trigger that eventually became the brand? And how did it lead to the partnership with JKR, Olivia?
Thank you, Jo. Well, the RSPCA has been around for 200 years, but we haven't actually looked at its brand. It hadn't been rebranded since 1970, so that was 50 years ago. So this has really been a long time coming. But our chief executive, who has been with us for now about 6 years, knew from the moment he started that actually the brand did need to be refreshed. It was feeling old and stuffy. But when you looked at the key metrics, we are one of the most well-known brands in the world, potentially, certainly in the UK. We have like 93% brand recognition. That's up there with the Coca-Colas and Jesus Christ. So, we have that really, really well-known brand. But when it comes to how people feel about the RSPCA, we were dropping in that sentiment, the consideration, and we could see that was actually affecting our income. We were seeing a decline in income. We weren't creating the sort of sentiment for people to get involved and to support the RSPCA. And when the threats that animals are facing us are actually increasing, we really needed a brand that was going to be able to sort of draw people in. And so that was really the trigger. We needed to respond to a decline in income, but we really started, getting under the kind of obvious metrics and looking behind them and seeing that actually that feeling, that sense of positive sentiment was lacking, and we needed to be much more loved. So we were respected, but we weren't loved. And that was a trigger for us to say, okay, we actually need to do something with this brand. But of course, with a 200-year-old brand that hasn't been looked at 50 years, it does come with, a huge responsibility. So that meant that we had to really understand more about who we were, and we had to work with a partner that was going to help us find the true selves, find out the true RSPCA, and help navigate a very complex stakeholder group. So the brand is owned by our board of trustees and our CEO. So we had to make a really good and robust case to demonstrate that we did need to make that first step and appoint an agency. So that was by looking at the figures, the decline in income, the decline in spontaneous awareness, and that sort of low consideration gap, the gap between that brand awareness and how people felt. And then we went on our quest to find an agency that was going to be perfect for us. We did work with AAR, so they helped us introduce to a real range of agencies, so that we could have that really good chemistry and really know that we were going to work with a great partner, and a partner was very much part of the process, so that we could find someone that was going to work with us and for the right reasons as well.
Yeah, exactly. And Lee, how was it for you guys to hear from RSPCA on this partnership?
Yeah, I mean, as a branding business and, with a London office, they don't often come as emotionally kind of exciting and as charged and as full of just feeling as these kind of briefs, because you're really not just dealing with a brand, you're dealing with a cause, a belief, a national institution, something that literally is the fabric of the nation. So with that comes enormous excitement, but also enormous responsibility. So, we entered into this with a real belief that we could make a difference for the brand and the organization, and we could try and find the essence of what really, the RSPCA believed of itself, but also what the rest of the world and its stakeholders believed of it. So yeah, these opportunities don't come around that often, so we jumped at it, and we wanted to demonstrate to them that we would be considerate, we would be responsible. We'd also deliver on their ambition to raise incomes, to raise consideration, to raise sentiment, and ultimately, get a next generation of supporters and people who are truly engaged in the brand. It was great.
Yeah, I can imagine. That's really good to know. And if we go a bit more into the actual strategy behind the rebrand, were there any key considerations going into this rebrand? And were there, like, I know we mentioned commercial just a little bit earlier as well, there were also these commercial and organizational goals you wanted to achieve?
Yeah, I mean, the three key drivers we're looking for and that we are measuring now and we will hold ourselves up against is that, spontaneous awareness. So are we front of mind? Are we in people's living rooms on their way to work? Are we reacting in that way? So that drives that spontaneous awareness. But that also leads to that driving that income. So income is really, really important for us, because without that income, we can't do the great work that we do. Consideration and trust, they're very linked. We need to be seen as being that trusted brand that people can come to for advice and information, but also, if we ask people to do something for us and for animals, they're more likely to do that as well. So the trust and consideration were key metrics. Yeah. And finally, Lee touched on it. We want people to participate in animal welfare at a societal level. So to do that, we have to be relevant, and we have to show people the breadth of what we do. Really help build that consideration and understanding of the cause. And we do that by showing up in a way that's really relevant for people, so that they can believe in us. So they're the kind of three really, really important drivers for us to know that we're successful. But the other really important bit, any brand strategy should be based around a purpose. And I think when I started looking at, how the RSPCA galvanized together, I was noticing that, we had the history, everyone knew that we'd been around for 200 years, and they knew that we were for animal welfare, but they were very centered in their own part of what they did. And actually there was a really important job to unify everything that we did in a really simple way, and so around this sort of common purpose that we now all share. And that was a key part of our strategic development, working really closely with JKR to help define what that purpose was. And that has been this kind of important for me, going into it and coming out with a clear purpose and direction was going to be a really, really important consideration.
Yeah, and if I was to build on that from our side, Olivia talked about such clarity of those objectives. We were clear from the outset what they were wanting to achieve, and also that kind of galvanizing internal and external kind of sentiment of any purpose and position that we work with them on. And from our point of view, as part of the process, we received an enormous amount of information, which we kind of et up gladly. But what struck us was for such a storied, historical, all-encompassing, hugely spontaneous, high awareness levels. What it was known for was relatively narrow, and this was all about opening up to more people, expanding the feelings that the people have to the brand, making people aware of the breadth of actions in support of animal welfare that the organisation does. Everything was around this kind of, how do you open the brand up to this next generation to be able to deliver on those objectives that were set us.
Yeah, exactly. That's really interesting, like especially like the purpose as well that was mentioned. And if we go back in time, it's been, of course, 200 years, which is amazing. But 50 years have passed since the last rebrand of RSPCA, and the Royal Society comes with a lot of responsibility, of course, as well. And how did the weight of tradition impact the project? And how did you go about balancing this renewing of the brand with honoring the legacy of RSPCA itself?
I think I'll start, Lee. I'm sure you'll come in on this one as well. But I think it was one of the really, really important parts of the pitch process that allowed us to be really confident that JKR were the right partner for us, is that, they talked about finding our true self. And I don't think any organisation that had 200 years of history could just tear up and start again and start afresh. We knew we needed to modernise. We knew we needed to demonstrate the breadth of what we had to do, but we had to stay true to our roots. And JKR really helped us dive into the history and find those pieces of we found this really rallying behaviour that was there right from the beginning, where we were campaigning, a really determined group of people set up in a very, progressive way. There wasn't the police at that time. There wasn't that kind of understanding of how you treat people, but yet the RSPCA was formed 200 years ago for the protection of animals. And so that power and that fire and that progressiveness, we really wanted to pull through and help come and shine a light on that, so that we weren't that stuffy organisation, but we were being true to our heritage. And so that was by looking into our history, finding the things and the triggers that made us who we were, was something that we really wanted to keep hold of. And that allowed us to then be more free to think about how we wanted to present ourselves in the future, because we were grounded in the essence of who we are, but not being dragged down by tradition and how we show up in a kind of more traditional way. But it's the essence of who we were with the things that came through. I think they had a really great quote about from Oscar Wilde, which I can't quite remember it now, but it really made us go, yes, that's, we've got to find our true self. And that was really reassuring.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was our agency was founded on that Oscar Wilde quote: "Be yourself. Everyone else has already taken." That belief that within you as an organisation there is a truth, and it's often our job to almost act a bit like is it archaeologists, maybe kind of sifting through and understanding where that came from and what it can mean and how it can be articulated for today's world. As part of the pitch process, we actually went and found a 100-year-old book, which was the book that celebrated the first centenary of the RSPCA. And we looked into that in terms of kind of what was the sentiment that was driving that organisation 100 years ago. We even were inspired by the Pantone reference of the colour of the actual book itself. And there was I can't remember the full title, but it had the word humanity in it. And it was the sense that doing good by animals is good for us as a greater society and humanity. And that really was the essence of, from our perspective, of where we started on trying to define the purpose of the institution. And so it came from a true place. It didn't come from book out of the air. We found it in the truth, and then worked with stakeholder interviews and some of the kind of stakeholder groups and steering groups, and trying to work with the people within the organization at every touch point to define that purpose, because what gets written together gets adopted together, and it was a really collaborative process to get to that purpose.
Yeah, Yeah, and it's interesting you mentioning, of course, involving those different stakeholders, because I can imagine you have to get everyone on board, and rebranding the RSPCA is a major undertaking. So you are a charity, you're an employer, you're a volunteer organization, you've got many charity shops as well throughout the country. You're also the oldest and largest animal welfare organization in the world. So how did you go about addressing the challenge of creating acceptance and engagement of the rebrand in a charity and volunteer organization? Was there anything key in driving this for the rebrand among the people and the partners of RSPCA?
Yeah, I think it's such an important learning for everyone who are going to embark on a branding process, but particularly for charities, because the pound, money is donated to all charities. It's voluntary donation, so you have to make sure that you're spending it really, really wisely. And brand is such a nebulous term. People don't understand it. It can be very emotional. People think it's just a logo. So in order to create that kind of change, you have to bring people on the journey with you. And for a lot of what I needed to do, sort of leading the strategy from internally, was to take people on a journey. And it started with helping people understand why brand is important. And I did a lot of work even before we appointed JKR, and trying to sort of lay the foundations with the internal team to talk about the value of brand, and showed examples of great charities who had grown by really investing in their brand to help bring that kind of understanding up. But we're also, we're not just a volunteer organisation, but we have 140 independent RSPCA branches. They deliver over 80% of the animal welfare work in terms of rescue and rehabilitation and rehoming in the community. So, and they all have their own trustees, their own CEOs in some cases. A lot of those are run by volunteers. So the network and the stakeholder environment and the ecosystem in order to deliver a brand is actually really complex. It's a bit like a franchise, but without as much control, if you like. So there was a huge amount of really listening to the community to understand the branches, really understanding how the brand showed up across lots of different touch points, and then inviting people to be able to share and be part of the journey and help iterate with us along the way. So we had, and I think it was quite new for the RSPCA, but we set up a group of brand champions. We had a smaller delivery team of about 20 to 30, and then about 130, people that volunteered to be part of this wider champion group, who were able to inform and feedback on the creative direction from the developing of the strategy all the way through to the creative development. And we were able to listen and learn. We used an insight platform that allowed us to really hear what people had to say, and then we could compare it with the public view as well. And that process was really invaluable because it gave us the confidence to know we were going in the right direction, but it was also we were able to show people that we'd listened, and where we might not have shared the same opinion, we were able to show across the board we were moving in the right direction. So it took a lot of the subjectivity out of decision making, and that in itself helped people come on board the journey. I'm not going to lie, I was really nervous about how the organisation would think about a rebrand, because it's been one of those things that has been, very, very well loved internally, and people just didn't quite understand why we would need to change it. So it was quite a seismic shift to have to bring people along and to help land it in a way where people were really confident and really appreciative of the change. So, and that was because we'd really invested in that engagement with them all the way through.
And I would, from our perspective, I think we spoke earlier about we ingested a huge amount of information. So the head side of this job was very thorough, very deep, understanding the kind of the objectives and the data. But then, Olivia and the team, and very early on, we realized, they were like, this is about people's feelings and emotions and about their beliefs. And so we spent a huge amount of time, literally kind of talking to stakeholders, working with those stakeholder groups to shape things, and steering groups. And we put our people's feet on the ground, designers and strategists and account people were going out into the field, into the stores, out at the inspectorate, because, you know, we wanted them to know that we believed in what they believed in. It wasn't just some job for us. It wasn't, you know, some bunch of creative types from London coming down and telling people what to do. It's like we wanted to help and make a difference. And so we had to make sure that, you know, on the rational side of things, you know, we understood the challenge. You know, as Olivia said, we used a brilliant tech platform called Loops that would allow us to understand what the sentiment was for the people internal and all the stakeholder groups external. So we had the rational side, but we want to make sure that, you know, we put in our effort on the emotional side as well, so that people believed in what we were all collectively building.
Yeah, exactly. So important to hear all voices and not just suddenly drop a rebrand on people and just be like, well, here you go, and you have to adapt to it if they don't know the whole journey to it. So that's a really good point. Yeah. And during this whole rebranding process, was there a magic moment for you in the process where everything came together? So was there a presentation or insight that you got that you were like, okay, now things start to like come together, and it starts to make sense?
Well, I think all of the work that we did up front in terms of that understanding, you know, JKR really helped lift the bonnet up to go and really understand the RSPCA and how we showed up in the world. And the really key bit where I just thought this is not going to fail was actually really early on in the process, because they sort of played back to us all of the information that they'd heard, and they sort of really drilled down to this pivotal insight, and that was that animal welfare is everyone's welfare. So no longer can the RSPCA try and solve the problem of animal welfare alone. This was about, you know, being good to animals is good for us all, and we've got to make sure that our brand speaks to that pivotal insight. And that was a shift that we wanted to see, and that really set the framework for really thinking about everything that we did after that point had to be true to that insight, that we had to attract more people. It wasn't just about attracting animal lovers. This was going, you know, really, really helping society understand that we all have a role to play in animal welfare. So that, for me, was that then set the foundation for everything that we went on to do.
Yeah.
Same for us. It was that moment where the scale and the inclusivity of what this organization is and wants to be known for going forward. It's like, right, okay, this is everything. It's everybody. It's every animal. It's got to be that big. And once you land at that point and people align to that point, that's when you realize that, you know, let's really open everything up to the nation, to every type of animal welfare, to every type of animal, to everybody. That was really kind of the like great. It's one of those
important moments. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. And if we just go back to the video we watched, the logo. So we just said a brand isn't just a logo, but is of course a big part of your brand. So tell us a bit more about the shift from a traditional logo to something completely new. I've seen some different like adaptations of the logo as well, like for each region, which is really nice to see. So yeah, tell us a bit more about that.
Well, the logo was the thing that people felt really attached to at the RSPCA, and felt that it was the thing that was really recognisable. It was, you know, it's enclosed in this lozenge shape that was quite restrictive, and it also really sort of lent itself to feeling quite authoritarian and quite like, you know, it sort of looked like the police, and it sort of played into this idea that we were the animal police or that we were an emergency service. And again, that's sort of setting us up in that kind of hero space where we know, you know, actually we can't be that person. We've got to be this welcoming, open organisation that can invite people in so that we can all play our part in animal welfare. So we knew it was holding us back. Our research helped tell us that it was the RSPCA, the name, the recognisable acronym, that was the thing that stood out, and that we to be able to have the flex to, you know, move away from the restrictions of the letters in the lozenge. But we also, being true to who we were, we didn't want to have a complete evolution. And so we've kept the shape of the lozenge and we've repurposed it in what we're calling our octopunct, which is a completely made up name, but it's come from our past. And in the olden days, we used to separate the letters out with these dots, and they're called interpuncts. And then we repurposed the name into octopunct with its 8 sides. And that has given us this really flexible and dynamic logo that allows us to house these wonderful illustrations of animals to showcase that we are here for more than cats and dogs, which were what we were known as, and actually represent that we are here for every animal in a really distinctive and bold and confident way, but still feels very true to where we've come from. So it is an evolution. It's much more dynamic. It works really well in motion, as we've seen from the logo, but also has that sort of sense of gravitas for who we are and that kind of influence as well. So I think we found a really perfect balance that draws from our history, but creates a much more modern and flexible logo.
And Olivia put that so eloquently, she might have put me out of a job, because that, in a nutshell, that was it. I think, a logo that was built 50 years ago was built for a completely different context, and and our job is to honor its DNA, make it recognizable, make it work in today's modern world, and that was really the essence of it. So we've all seen examples of when branding has gone too modern and lost its truth and its distinctiveness, and the last thing we wanted to do. So all those things that Olivia's mentioned, they're deliberate acts to retain color that you would recognize, retain a typeface, use a shape, but take away the authoritative nature of it, use it as a flexible device that can talk to location, talk to different animals. So that was really the essence of trying to make sure that it feels like the best representation of the RSPCA today, not a different representation of the RSPCA.
No, exactly. And I know we briefly touched upon being distinctive. And I know that JKR prides itself on crafting distinctive assets and identities that help brands stand out. So what key considerations for distinctiveness went into the RSPCA rebrand?
I mean, I think from our perspective, it was that point around really honouring what people associate with the RSPCA, but not being beholden to the way it was currently being represented. So understanding colour in a palette that could be perceived to be the RSPCA, but it's also progressive and modern and works in digital. Understanding that if you want to break out of just being seen for cats and dogs, you've got to be able to have an ownable suite of icons that encompass every type of animal. The branch network is so important. You've got to really be flexible enough to allow the branches to have enough freedom to represent themselves within a system that is recognizable. And how does motion play? Even took the motion of some of the animals and played it into the motion principles of how the brand works. So we just really wanted to make sure that anything we did it from the sentiment of what we understood the brand to be, and something that people would associate with the RSPCA, kind of how we went about it.
I think the only thing that I would add is that I think the brand strategy, the brand on a page is so helpful to help us hold us, everything we do, we look at and say, are we being true to this strategy? And that's helping us be really distinctive as well. And we have, the purpose is the thing that aligns us all. And that's that we exist to inspire everyone to create a better world for every animal. And so from moving from something that's, been very narrow in what we talk about in terms of that rescue and care and our inspectorate and cats and dogs, we're able to talk to that and demonstrate that vital work we do, but also talk to the great work that we're doing in improving the lives of farmed animals, our work in changing laws, because it all is centered upon that, distinctive brand purpose, and that's holding us to account. So I think that's been really helpful and has allowed us to continue to do a lot, but do it in a way that shows up in a distinctively.
Yeah, exactly. It's about not losing your identity, who you were at the beginning, and keep that going. So now that we are kind of at the launch of this rebrand, It's the beginning, of course. So what has been instrumental in ensuring this continued adoption of the new brand identity? What have you been doing, or are you planning anything different?
Well, I think it builds on my last point. You know, the fact that we have this very, very robust brand strategy has allowed us to build on our partners. We've got a great relationship with AMV, who has helped us with our brand campaign launch. That really took the brand to market, and we worked really well as a partnership with JKR in helping develop that content, and that has to be, you know, based on that. You know, it was such a good process and it all came down to the fact that we had the very robust brand strategy to help us. It allowed us to be bolder, and allowed us to push creative boundaries, you know, in our marketing. So I think that has been hugely helpful. We've undergone an enormous amount of work, and, you know, I have to say a huge shout out to the team, our internal teams, who have redesigned and reimagined all of our content and our websites to really bring the brand to life. And that we did that at breakneck speed, and probably maybe broke a few people along the way, but, you know, we are really showing up in a brilliant way now, but we do have still a lot more to do. Motion is one of the things that, you know, it's appearing in small pockets, but we really want to turn up the volume on that, because it is a great way of showing how dynamic the brand is, and how, you know, it is really appealing to a broader audience. So those sorts of things are coming up, but we still have quite a long tail to do in bringing the branches to life. You know, we're 140 branches, 300 shops. That project is well underway, but we've got some work to do.
Yeah.
I think from our perspective, it's to provide the guidance that's simple to understand, easy to execute, adaptable to people's needs, and having the presence to be supportive along that journey as new questions come up or new applications come up. And I say just constantly trying to ensure that, you know, the brand system is working for all the things we anticipated, but some of the things we may never have anticipated. So it's just keeping that support alongside, making sure that the team's got the right tools to, and the, you know, in the right format to make sure they can deliver against the vision.
Yeah, exactly. And it's great to see your really strong partnership here. And of course, with the launch of this new rebrand, you've worked probably with a lot of other partners as well. And it would be interesting to know, how do you ensure great collaboration in a rebrand? So how do you make sure everybody pulls in the same direction and you're on the same line?
So I think setting out the kind of why we need to do it, the case for change at the beginning was, you know, a really, really important factor. We couldn't talk about it as openly as we would have wanted to right at the beginning, because we needed to show that we were doing our due diligence and it wasn't a done deal, and that we, you know, we would only proceed changing this heritage brand if we had the evidence to support that. So in terms of how we engage people, you know, we just had to keep reaffirming the why we were doing this and why it was going to help us help more animals. And that was a really important narrative all the way through. The champion groups were important in terms of being able to engage and replay what we were doing, listen and learn throughout the process. It wasn't just at the end. And they were able to champion to the rest of the organisation and influence the rest of the organisation as we moved through the process. But that kind of clarity of brief, the why we were doing it, we could always refer back to. And then when we had the strategy agreed with that brand purpose, we were able to reinforce that message and really reinforce why we were doing it, because we needed to inspire everyone to create that better world for every animal. So we had these grounding points throughout, and then that's allowed us to reach out to new partners, to, you know, whether we were working with, you know, other animal welfare charities or organisations, we're able to really talk to that purpose, because we're all in this together. And that, again, all of this reaffirms what we're doing. So it's been such a grounding but central part of keeping us on track, and keeping people pointing in the same direction.
Yeah, and I think that the strategic framework was key. I think from our perspective, doing the due diligence on the design and the brand system, which enables people like BBDO to be able to, gives them enough freedom and expression with any touch point they need to apply it. But then you've got that rigor and discipline and the distinctiveness at every touch point. So it's great for us to see other agencies, the internal team at RSPCA and the branch network embrace it and make it their own. That's always to us a sign that the actual, the rigor and discipline of the branding processes is doing its job. So it's great.
Yeah. So important to have a clear strategy and structure before you dive into a big rebrand. That's good. Yeah. So we're talking about a rebrand in this modern day and age that we are in now. If you compare this rebrand to how a rebrand would have looked for RSPCA maybe 5 or 10 years ago, what do you think is different? And are there any key qualities of a never mind, of a modern brand?
Well, the things that are really great about the current new RSPCA brand is that it's so inclusive, and it really has been designed to be inclusive. We spent a lot of time on working with our internal teams on accessibility to make sure that we were showing up in a way that was inclusive, because that talks to that purpose, and that core pivotal insight. So we did need to do that. It has, we've touched on the motion, we were so print-based before and looked like we were print-based. So it has been a real, it's allowed us to think about the possibilities about showing up in a much more digital world, which I know that's what most normal organisations do, but we are a heritage brand. Sometimes we've been a bit like a tanker. So it's sort of unlocked that, determination to become much more digital first as well, because that's where the world is going. So from the RSPCA's point of view, I think it would have been very difficult to get a rebrand over the line sort of 10 years ago. I think the role of Chris Sherwood, our CEO, in terms of setting the strategy, setting the direction of travel, has been absolutely essential in this rebrand. So without that, I don't think we would have had a brand that aligned to who we were or where we needed to be. So
yeah, I think at that point, that for us anyway, that having the RSPCA team so aligned, empowered, committed to making this happen was 5 years, 10 years ago, maybe wouldn't have happened because of that very truth. I think there's one shift in branding is older than language, so I don't think it's going to go into any new world anytime soon. But I think what has really fundamentally kind of shifted in the last 5-10 years is discipline and control versus adaptation and freedom. And I think this was a great example of enabling both of those, so that you can have flexibility within a system and be clear on what you fix and be clear on what you're allowed to flex. And so that's the kind of key difference, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Nice. And before we go into the Q&A, do you have any best advice to other organizations, charities, and brands diving into a major rebrand like this? And is there anything you wish you had known before going into this rebrand? Tricky one. a lot of advice. You've already given so much advice during that.
I think you have to get the right partner, and you have to have a leadership team you have to get the leadership team aligned and agreed at the outset. Otherwise, it just becomes it would become a much more rocky ride, and actually it was a real pleasure to work on this project with the RSPCA because the leadership team were so aligned and because we had a great partner, and it was all very enjoyable. So get those two things right. So you might have to do a lot of upfront work before you even get to your brand partner, but get the leadership team aligned, involved, and completely engaged throughout the whole process, and you'll be set to success.
Nice.
100% agree with that, and just say, know why you're doing it. They're doing it because you want to look different or modern or whatever isn't the reason to do it. You have to have a clarity of what is this setting out to achieve, and for us, having that made it it was a much easier job than it first appeared on paper to get this out into the world, because the team at the RSPCA was so clear on what they wanted to achieve from it.
Amazing. That's really helpful and good advice. Thank you. We have some questions, so let me just dive into them. So the first question is, was there anything during the rebrand journey that didn't work out the way you wanted or provided a challenge that you can learn from in the future?
It has been really a brilliant process. And I think there were moments when, of course, anyone, thinking about changing such a big brand would, there were a few sleepless nights at times, but I think we worked so well together, and we kept reminding ourselves on both sides of, the partnership, that we do have to trust in the process. And that was a great learning, as long as the process is sound. But, JKR really steered us through a very simple, structured process to get it done. And that was really helpful. I think, the challenge of having so many independent branches to work with and to get it right is a challenge. And we're still working through that, because, in an ideal world, it would all go live at the same time. And, my expectations had to be brought down a bit to think about it's okay to roll this out over a few years, probably over a couple of years, and that's okay. So that's, one of the things that I think I learned is understanding, what you can deliver and what you can roll out over a period of time. And that is important for a charity as well, because finances and money is scarce, so you have to make sure that you're doing it in a really sort of sustainable and achievable way. So that was just my own learning.
Yeah, I think staying the course and trusting that the process is the right way to get to the answer. It's so easy to think you've got ahead of yourself and then cut a corner because you think you're through a gate, and then you realize you're not. So I think it was the discipline the team showed was great. And yeah, I think what we've learned is people's feelings trump their reason every time. We knew that, but in this institution, you've got to ensure that people feel and believe in what the answer is, not just rationally understand it's something that they should do. I think we're constantly talking to the team now about emulating this process so that you bring people on as successfully as it has been in this one.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, thank you. Then another question: how has your target audience reacted to the rebrand so far? FYI, looks great, by the way, and love the approach.
So our audiences have been really, really brilliant. It's been hugely well received. We did a few things. We couldn't talk to everyone at any one time about it, so we did a reveal before we went live on a live Zoom call, and so we could see everyone's reactions coming through. And particularly when you've got all of our branches, there's thousands of people who actually hadn't, they were knowing that they knew it was happening, but they hadn't seen it at some time. So that was a big moment for us, for one of our internal stakeholder audiences. And because we grounded everything in that strategy, and we've been building people up to the why for a while, that went really, really well, and unexpectedly well. And then, of course, when it all comes out live in the real world, we've really seen, we've had lots of really positive feedback. I think we've done some social listening, and there was a lot of noise. It was the most Googled rebrand in the UK within the last year, and that trumped a few other really big ones. So I felt really pleased about that. But then when people were talking about the RSPCA rebrand, the emoji that was used the most was the heart, and 1 in 4 emojis was a heart. So I just, really felt like the love and the engagement was really dialing up. So the initial responses are really, really positive. We launched with a brand campaign as well, so we were really sort of pushing the brand out there, and I think that really helped to do the two things together, because landing a rebrand for a charity in the press is quite it's a sensitive nature. You've got to make sure that you're landing it well, so that you're not getting you're focusing on the why rather than like how much did that cost, so that we could always demonstrate that this is going to benefit animals. So it's really good to be able to see really positive feedback so far. So of course you will always get some people commenting, and sometimes some of the press were going to comment anyway about how successful it was or what they thought about it. But we expected that, and we were really well prepared with good Q&As from our media team, again working as well with JKR in terms of the positioning of it. So it's been really positive so far.
Amazing. Okay, thank you. And then one more here. So Olivia, can you tell me more about the influencing processes that went on internally to get this work over the line in terms of pitching the need for a rebrand initially, and then last on the repositioning and the final creative?
Yeah, I mean, the first bit about, you know, making the case, there was a lot of data that was sat behind that. So really understanding what did our audiences think, how are other charities performing, where could we see the room for improvement. We could see that like our market share was on the decline. We could see that other charities that have invested in their brand grew their market share. So we could really, there was a lot of modeling that went on, you know, with the detail that said, actually, if you invest in a brand, we are going to be able to affect all of these measures. So there was the case for change was really detailed and structured and clear in terms of what we were trying to achieve. And we were also then balancing that with the needs of animals now. So we knew that the role that the RSPCA had to play was set against this sort of backdrop that animals are facing some of their, you know, biggest challenges in history. If you think about the rise of intensive farming, you know, the loss of wildlife and biodiversity, you know, the impact of human behavior on animals is actually really great, and we need to be able to change the way people think about animals if we're going to be able to support them in the future. So really setting out that case up front was a really important part of that pitching process to the organisation, and then keeping them on the journey, doing like regular updates, really reinforcing the why. I mean, I did hundreds of presentations about what a brand wasn't, and kept talking about it's not just a logo. And that was essential because that's the immediate thing that people think about. So it's laying the foundation for that strategy, I think.
Yeah. Good point to reiterate that a logo is not just your brand, and there's so much more that goes into it. But no, thank you for that. And then Lee, one for you. What were the biggest creative challenges with this rebrand, and how did you solve them?
I think most important thing, because we were doing the purpose and the kind of internal engagement right through to the actual delivery of a branding system, was making sure that creative and strategy were always in that conversation. There wasn't a handoff of, right, we've done the strategy, creative team, make it go up. It was very much, okay, all through the way. And a lot of the testing we did, if it was this purpose, here's tonally where it might take you. If it was this one, here's what it might feel and look like. So that we're testing the consequence of the strategy through what creatively it was going to show up like. And I think that was key, because you already, in buying a purpose, you kind of knew where it was going to take you as an so that was one of the creative challenges that I think on this project worked really well. I think as well, you know, with the 50-year gap between what was before and what was now, you know, what you have to avoid is throwing everything out because it doesn't work, and then reimagining everything. And again, we've seen those rebrands where it all looks great and modern, but it doesn't look like the institution that it was. And so I think we always had to be really mindful of, but is in being modern, is it still got the DNA of the RSPCA? They were the two big things that I think we were constantly checking ourselves against.
It was interesting because there were times when we said, no, we've got to push it further. And we then go, oh, hold on a minute, let's see what the audiences think. And, you know, it would maybe feel too uncomfortable. And actually what we ended up with is something that really did that. It held our heritage whilst also appearing much more modern and fresh, which was perfect.
Yeah, nice. Okay, thank you. And then we've got one here. You've spoken a lot about aligning your branding. Our branding feels unaligned, but we aren't in a position financially to go into a complete rebrand right now. Can you give any advice on how to align current branding better to do better in the interim?
Is that a me question?
That's, from your experience with brands.
It's a really hard one, you know.
Yeah.
In an ideal world, you have the opportunity to press pause and then reset. I think a lot can be done when you just look at what is it about how you show it now that is distinctive, and how can you make it work better through systems, through motion, through other aspects of the, you know, the mix of branding tools, rather than which is always the worry. If I change my logo, I probably have to spend a lot of money refitting, you know, whether it's cans, bottles, pumps, fronts, whatever it is, bank cards. That's where the investment comes. So sometimes you've got to be a bit more mindful of that. And Olivia made a great point. You know, she wanted to turn the old identity off and the new on in every branch overnight, and it just isn't going to happen. And sometimes you've got to make peace with the fact that sometimes it's a step-by-step process. So yeah, that's kind of, you know, do what you can.
Yeah.
And maybe using tools like the Frontify, the brand template tools, they build some, you know, templates for people to use so that actually build the consistency there. And that's something that we're, you know, trying to give to our branches, so they don't have to do the heavy lifting of design, but they've got something that they can use simply and easily that has the consistency already baked in. So things like that might help too.
Yeah, exactly. Definitely, yeah. So then on the data or metrics, is there anything that has suggested that the rebrand has achieved its goal of stronger engagement, or any other objectives that you've put into place?
So we always set out that, you know, brand building is a long-term thing. So we've set that, was very clear as well in the business case to the board, because we didn't want people to get cold feet and not see the immediate metrics going up. You know, brand building is long-term. So we've got, you know, 12, 24, 36 months targets all sort of laid out. But the initial response, you know, the response that we're seeing from our supporters, the response that we're seeing on social are all really positive indications. Our fundraising campaign at the moment is doing really well. Now, obviously, I want to take credit for all of that, but it's a really great campaign. It's very emotive, but you know, we're seeing positive signs of people wanting to engage. But really, that internal response has just been brilliant. So it's given people that kind of sense of unity, and sort of excitement. It's turned on that kind of urgency. You know, our brand behavior is all about rallying humanity for animals, and you get that sense internally. You get people feel really excited and determined to do better for the cause, and I think that for me is a really, really strong metric. It feels positive. It feels like we're in a good place, and that will allow us to realize, you know, our kind of longer term metrics as well. So I'm feeling really positive about it.
Yeah, definitely. Great. I think we've come to the end of it. So any other questions? Sorry, we didn't get to them, but hopefully we've answered them in the meantime as well. But thank you everyone so much for joining, and I hope this has given you more insight in how you can rebrand and even use your current tools or brand that you have to be stronger. And Olivia and Lee, thank you so much for your insights and explaining the whole process of your RSPCA rebrand. Really appreciate it. And yeah, we'll send the video on afterwards in probably a few days. But if anything else comes up, yeah, you can always reach out to us, Frontify, of course, as well. And I'm sure Olivia and Lee will be able to answer any questions over LinkedIn, maybe. But yes, thank you again so much. We really appreciate it.
No, thanks.
Thank you.
Really
Thanks for having us.
Thanks everyone. Thanks for listening.
Thanks all. Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye.